Most people my age are gone, and I keep asking myself why I'm still here. My name is Marie. I am 104 years old, and I think I finally understand what kept me alive this long, and what nearly took me out far too soon. I did not grow up knowing anything about health. Nobody talked about that where I came from. You ate what was put in front of you. You were grateful for it, and you did not ask questions. That was rural Georgia in the 1920s, and the food on our table was whatever my mother could stretch across 7 children and a husband who worked from before sunrise until well after dark. We ate salt pork and white bread and fried everything in whatever grease we had saved from the week before. Sweet tea sat in a pitcher on the counter from morning to night, and drinking it was as automatic as breathing. Nobody thought twice about it. That was just life. I married John when I was 19 years old. He was 22. Tall and serious in the way that young men who have worked hard since childhood tend to be serious. He did not laugh easily, but when he did, it came from somewhere deep, and you felt it. We built a life together the way most people did back then, slowly, with our hands, out of very little. We had 4 children. We moved twice. We survived things I will not spend time naming, because every family from that era has their own version of the same story. What I want to tell you about is the food, because that is where this story really lives. For the first 40 years of my life, I ate the way I had been raised to eat, and I did not question it because nobody around me was questioning it either. Processed things started filling the grocery stores, and I welcomed them the way everyone did. They were easy, they were cheap, and after a long day of working and raising children, easy and cheap felt like a blessing. Canned soups loaded with sodium, white sugar and everything. Packaged crackers and cookies that lasted on the shelf for months, which should have told me something but did not. Margarine instead of butter because someone on the radio said it was better for your heart, and we believed them because why would they lie? Soda pop became a regular thing in our house. Sweetened cereals, bread that had almost no resemblance to the bread my mother used to make. John started having heart troubles in his late 50s. The doctor used words I did not fully understand and handed him a list of things to avoid, but the list felt impossible to follow because it described most of what we ate every single day. We tried to make adjustments. We really did, but we did not know enough, and honestly, we did not take it seriously enough either, because at that age, you still feel like the worst things happen to other people. John died at 67, a heart attack, on a Tuesday morning while he was sitting in his chair by the window reading the newspaper. I was in the kitchen. I heard nothing. That is what I remember most about that morning, how completely quiet it was. I was 46 years a wife, and then I was not. After John passed, something shifted in me that I did not expect. I stopped eating for a while, not on purpose, just because hunger felt irrelevant. And then slowly, when I came back to it, I started noticing what food actually did to my body in a way I never had before. When I ate the heavy, greasy, sugary things, I felt it differently than I used to. My joints ached more. My sleep was worse. I felt foggy in a way that scared me because my mind had always been the thing I relied on most. And when I ate simpler things, vegetables from my garden, eggs, fruit, plain oats in the morning, I felt clearer, lighter, not just in body, but in the way my thoughts moved. I want to be careful here because I am not a doctor, and I never claim to be. What I am telling you is what I observed in my own body over many decades, and what I eventually came to understand about the specific things I stopped eating, and how my health changed when I did. The first thing I gave up was sugar, not all at once, but steadily, over a few years in my late 60s. Not because a doctor told me to, but because I started paying attention to what happened in my body after I ate it. The afternoon tiredness, the way my hands would swell slightly, the headaches I had accepted as normal my entire life that simply stopped being normal once I stopped feeding them. I had been drinking sweet tea since I was old enough to hold a glass, and giving it up felt like losing something cultural, something tied to my identity and my home. But I did it. I switched to plain water and plain tea, and within a few months I felt a difference that I could not deny. The second thing was the heavily processed foods. The things that came in packages with ingredients I could not pronounce, and a shelf life longer than some of my houseplants. I understand why people eat them. They are everywhere. They are affordable. They are designed to taste good in a way that makes you want more. But I believe with everything in me that those foods were shortening John's life while I was putting them on his plate. And that thought has never fully left me. The sodium alone in those processed soups and crackers and canned things was doing quiet damage that we never connected to the symptoms we were experiencing because no one taught us to connect them. The third thing I stopped eating was refined white bread and white flour in the way I used to consume it. Daily in large amounts as the foundation of almost every meal. I switched to whole grains slowly and without drama, and again, the change in how I felt was real enough that I kept going. By the time I was in my mid-70s, my diet looked almost nothing like the one I had lived on for the first half of my life. More vegetables than I ever ate before, fish instead of red meat most of the time, olive oil, which my daughter introduced me to, and which I resisted for longer than I should have. Berries, nuts, beans, and lentils cooked simply, a small amount of good dark chocolate which I refuse to give up and which I believe has caused me no harm whatsoever. I am not telling you I have been perfect. I have not. I have grandchildren who bake, and I have eaten their cookies with full happiness and no regret. Food is also love, and I have never forgotten that. My mother fed her 7 children with care and sacrifice and whatever she had available, and there was nothing wrong with her love. What I am telling you is that the particular things I remove from my regular daily eating, the sugar, the processed packaged foods, the refined flour in large quantities, the seed oils and margarine and artificially flavored things, I believe that removing those things is a significant reason I am still sitting here talking to you at 104 years old, while my doctor looks at my blood work with an expression that suggests he does not entirely believe what he is reading. There is something else I want to say, and it is harder to explain than the food part. When I changed what I ate, I also changed how I thought about my body. I started treating it like something worth paying attention to, like a relationship that required honesty and care. For most of my life, I had treated my body the way many people do, like a machine that should keep running regardless of what you put in it. and you only notice it when something breaks. That shift in attention, that decision to actually listen, I think that matters as much as any specific food I removed. I think about John sometimes when I am in the kitchen. I think about the mornings I made him breakfast without knowing what I know now, and I feel something that is not quite guilt but is adjacent to it, a sadness for the information we did not have, or the information we had but dismissed because changing felt too hard. I would give anything to have had this conversation with him, to have sat down together and said, let us actually look at this. Let us take this seriously before it is too late. If you are watching this and you are young, please understand that every decade you eat this way is a decade you are borrowing against. The damage from sugar and processed food is not something you feel dramatically all at once. It builds quietly, the way debt builds when you are not watching, and by the time the symptoms are loud enough to alarm you, you have already lost years you cannot get back. I am not saying this to frighten you. I am saying it because I am 104 years old, and I have watched enough people I loved leave this world earlier than they should have. And in most cases, the food they ate their whole lives was part of that story. If you are older and you think it is too late, it is not. My body changed at 68. It changed at 75. Small, real changes that added up to something I am still experiencing today. Your body is not finished responding to what you give it. It is waiting. I do not know how much longer I have. At my age, you stop pretending that tomorrow is guaranteed. But I sit here in good health, with a clear mind and a heart that is still working, and I feel something I can only describe as gratitude, not for luck, but for the moment in my 60s when I finally started paying attention. When I finally asked what I was actually putting into my body every single day, and whether I wanted to keep doing it. That question changed everything. Ask yourself that question, not tomorrow. Today, before the next meal, before the next habit you have been carrying since childhood, without ever examining it. You are worth the examination. Your life is worth it, and I promise you, from 104 years of living in this body, that it is never too late to start listening to what it has been trying to tell you all along.